What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller, Shane Black from the Hook 'em Horn Show. We're back today, Selection Sunday. The NCAA tournament bracket has been decided. Texas is in the NCAA tournament. Well, they're in the first four. I mean, I'll take it. I think that this Texas team, while it wasn't the best regular season by any means, the fact that they still have a chance in the postseason and, look pretty good. And the SEC tournament got two big wins that really saved their season, were the deciding factor here. There's a couple of different storylines I wanted to talk about with Texas in this video, but the main thing being just, I don't know, the fact that we have postseason basketball to talk about on the 40 acres for what is it, the fifth straight year, is nice. I mean, three straight tournaments of winning at least one game Texas has right now. Do you consider this a fifth if they win the play-in? I don't.
No, I don't either.
I mean, if they manage to beat Illinois next weekend in the round of 64, obviously that counts. But one step at a time here. Texas, they have a moderately difficult matchup in the first four. You get 11 seed Xavier, rematch of the 2023 Sweet 16. There are some players on this Xavier team that were key pieces on that 2023 team. Zach Fremantle being the main one, guy that I believe is leading their team in scoring this season, if I'm not mistaken, around 17 a game. Texas opened as a 2.5-point dog. Xavier, like you were saying off camera, kind of heated up down the stretch. Got some big wins that were able to propel them into the postseason, because I think they ended the regular season, what was it, like a half dozen game winning streak or something like that.
Yep.
And then they kind of pushed Marquette to the brink in their first game in the Big East tournament. So while yes, they did not make it very far in the Big East tournament, they pushed a pretty good Marquette team to the brink and scored a lot of points. This is a Xavier team that can score. Over the last month, they've averaged over 80 points per game. Again, winning 7 straight in the Big East. While, yes, this is not the best year for the Big East, it's still no easy task. It's still one of the better conferences in college basketball. Xavier also a team that had a lot of big wins during the regular season. I look at that stretch they had back in late January. I remember that, where they beat Marquette and UConn in the span of like 1 week, including, I believe, that Marquette win came on the road. So, this is a team that's got some big wins under their belt. They know how to play in the spotlight. They did pretty well against the one SEC team they did play at a neutral site during the regular season, beat South Carolina by 9 points, which I guess at that point in time, South Carolina was still trying to figure a lot of things out. But, Texas wasn't able to beat South Carolina during the regular season. So transitive property is never one that you can really apply. This team beat this team, so they should beat this team. But still, the point holds that, Texas still has a fight on their hands. What is it, Tuesday night that this game will be? Wednesday.
Yep.
Keep getting this mixed up. Anyway, it should be a fun game. I mean, these are two pretty high-powered teams with good backcourts. Each team has a guy scoring over 17 a game this season. I still feel okay about Texas's chances here. I think they've beaten a lot better teams than Xavier this season, but it's not one that's going to come easy. Also, Texas, against really any quad 1 or quad 2 team, nothing has really come easy for them this season. So, but I'll pass it over to you, get your thoughts before we talk about like the NCAA tournament in general and some other stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into Selection Sunday, my mindset was that the Horns, it was probably like 40-60 whether or not they were going to make the tournament. And then when you see the first 4 game between San Diego State and UNC, I was like, okay, well, between West Virginia and Xavier and Indiana and Boise State, like I don't think Texas is going to make the cut. So pleasantly surprising to see their name pop up. I was kind of already onto the hiring cycle that was likely to ensue over the next couple of weeks. But you can't kill off RT that quickly. So I'm excited. I mean, now we've talked about this in previous videos.
You were down on Texas for that A&M game.
I was.
Yeah.
I was. They proved me wrong, and I think that A&M game is almost a microcosm of the whole season. Like, this team is very talented on an individual basis, and When it's all working, they can play with some of the best teams in the country. I mean, even look back, like they hung with Tennessee a couple days ago for 25, 30 minutes of that game. They hung with Tennessee earlier in the season. They made a late push against Auburn. So, I mean, we've always known that this team is supremely talented. Obviously, have some flaws with the rotation in regard to the front court depth and things of that nature. But I think it's always come back to coaching scheme and how and where this coaching staff, puts their players in. Like, what positions are they putting them in to succeed? And I think, funny enough, a funny anecdote, I was watching at work on Friday, the Texas-Tennessee game with a coworker who's from Spain, big basketball fan, and without me saying anything to him, I had the game on for a couple minutes, and he was like, he made a comment about how isolation based the Texas offense was. And I was like, for you to watch 5 minutes of Texas basketball and to make that statement is absolutely hilarious, because this is what we've seen all season long. But when you have talents like Trey Johnson, Tremont Mark, Arthur Kaluma, you're going to be able to win some games when they kind of just put it all together on the offensive end. But yeah, I think pumped to be able to get a shot at the dance. I think, kind of to wrap up, what my whole point is here is that Texas could go on a mini run here, because we've seen them beat good teams this season. So you could tell me that Texas will lose to Xavier by 15 points, or you could tell me that Texas makes the second weekend, and I'd believe both of them. I'm looking at Xavier specifically. We talked about this off camera. You can't complain about any matchup, especially when you're one of the last 4 teams in the tournament. But I do think, I think Texas matches up pretty well. Xavier, one of the better shooting teams in the country, but not overly strong on the glass, which is something that Texas struggles with. So I think this is a game where you won't get out physical. As long as you run them off the 3-point line, you're going to have some success. So I'm excited for this game. I'm excited for the prospects going forward, and kind of what we said the past couple of weeks. You're in a good spot as a Texas fan. You could put together a little run here, or you could, potentially fall out gracefully and start the hiring cycle. So we'll see, but always excited to preview an NCAA tournament game nonetheless.
Yeah, Rodney Terry's squads, something else that can give you some confidence for the postseason is, say what you want to about Rodney Terry and his coaching. Texas has been ready for the NCAA tournament for the past few years under his direction. If they do manage to pull off a couple, based on the current betting lines, a couple of upsets against Xavier and then Illinois later in the week, that's 4 years in a row now, 5 years, 4 years that they would have won at least one tournament game. I'd have to go back and run the numbers there, but I know that would be the longest streak in a while for this program for postseason wins consecutive years. So, in regard to the Xavier matchup, is there anything else that concerns you about the Musketeers that you would highlight against Texas?
I think, I almost think that these teams are polar opposite in a way, because I think that Texas is more talented than Xavier, looking top to bottom down the roster. But I think Xavier with Sean Miller is much better coached. And you see that on the offensive end of the floor. I mean, you mentioned averaging over 80 points per game the last month of play. They won 6 or 7 to end the regular season, and really should have beat Marquette in the quarterfinals of the Big East tournament, were it not for a collapse in the second half. But they move the ball really well on the offensive end of the floor. They're 15th in the country with averaging nearly 17 assists per game. As I mentioned, one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. So if you aren't assignment sound, you are going to give up a lot of open shots. And when you give up open shots, they're going to knock them down a fair amount of times. And I think oftentimes this year on the defensive end, it hasn't really been a lack of effort, but we have seen guys like Trey Johnson, Tremont Mark, Jordan Pope just get caught ball watching, guys cutting behind them. And that would be a cause for concern for me. I'm not really worried about the effort. I think the effort that we saw in the SEC tournament, specifically in that A&M game, was terrific. I was a little harsh on Tremont Mark going into the SEC tournament for sometimes, having a little bit of a apathetic nature on the court, but he was all over it, getting down and dirty. And I think you really got to appreciate that. And I think for, half of this team, it'll be their last game in college whenever they do bow out, or if they happen to cut down the nets in early April. So this is their last run in the NCAA tournament. So I'm not worried about that. I am worried about more being assignment sound on the defensive end of the floor.
I don't know if I would say ball watching. I mean, yeah, off-ball defense has been an issue this season. Closeouts, secondary assignments, um, generic lack of communication on the perimeter sometimes. Yeah, I mean, as someone that played basketball for a while and played lacrosse for a long time, played soccer for a while, communication with the back line that helped defense. Incredibly important things, and communication always, primitive. I think that this Texas team never really found its identity on the defensive end of the floor. They don't have enough physicality in the front court. It has gotten a bit frustrating to see Caden Shedrick just getting bullied around in the front court in a lot of games. And then, they don't really have another guy that they can, like, Zarek Onyema is, like, I think a good, like, third big man in the rotation. But, they had to give him some additional minutes this year when Shedrick was either injured or, was kind of getting boxed out a lot. So, physicality in the front court, issues in losses against South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss. I think that the backcourt, you're going to just probably have to outscore them, and you're going to have you're just going to have high effort plays, because this Xavier team, like you said, they're well coached. They do have some proven experience on this team, a good amount of capable floor spacers. Something I don't want to overlook, though, for Xavier is this is a team that likes to play up tempo. They move the ball well, but they like to get out and run in transition. I think they're fourth in the nation in fast break scoring, over 15 a game in transition scoring this year. So, I mean, Texas has actually done pretty well at defending that, because oftentimes Terry's squads have been, like to get out and run if you have the opportunity. This year, not so much, but they can play to that game if need be. My concern for this is running Xavier off the 3-point line. Xavier got 4 guys that have all shot at least 35% from 3 on at least 2 shots a game over this long winning streak they had over the past month. I don't know if Texas is going to be able to contend with Texas, I think, was 3rd from the bottom in the SEC in opponent 3-point field goal percentage over the past 10 games. So I don't know. That's a pretty specific number. The larger point here is that, yes, Texas has struggled with teams that are able to effectively move the ball around the perimeter. When you got, secondary, tertiary playmakers like Xavier does on the wing and in the backcourt, it's going to force Texas to communicate really well, be on time where they need to, call out cutters, the whole all the simple stuff that you would expect in a game like this. But yeah, the one point you bring up that is the most interesting to me is the fact that Xavier doesn't really have that go-to physical big man down low. They don't really have that old school basketball, which has given Texas a lot of problems this year when teams have that guy. Now, I use this example a lot, but I think that NC State team last year in the postseason would have given Texas a ton of fits this year. And so, I mean, we could talk about the Illinois conversation if Texas makes it that far, but I think this game, you're right. Texas, we can do our predictions here in a moment, but do you think Texas is a little bit undervalued at a 2.5, 3-point underdog?
I think it makes sense because of the volatility with the team. I think you kind of know what you're going to get from Xavier. They're not really going to beat themselves. I mean, we've seen that over the last 6 weeks. Like you said, they're going to score the basketball. They have some lapses on the defensive end of the floor, not the best rebounding team, but we kind of know what we're going to get. I think with Texas, could be really good, could be really bad, like we discussed. So, I could see Texas coming out and establishing their will in, having a lot of good isolation scoring possessions and end up winning this game by 15. I could also see Xavier end up winning this game. So, I think if you're looking at it and you want to find some value, I think you take a Texas alt spread or something, like Texas -10, Texas to win by double digits, something like that. I think it's fair to that, Vegas has given Xavier the nod just because of the consistency that the Musketeers have shown down the stretch.
One thing I want to mention too is that I think having Kendall Weaver back is really going to matter in this game.
Yes. Yep.
That's one guy I really want to point out because, let
me ask you this before you go, and this is on the same conversation. Do you think that the selection committee is deep? I don't even know the best way to phrase this. They're deep enough into the weeds to understand that Kendall Weaver pretty much sat all of conference play and then returned for I don't think so either.
No, I was looking at it yesterday and I was thinking that at this point, the selection committee, they so highly value the quad 1 and quad 2 resume for teams, especially this year in the SEC with was it a record 14 teams made? Yeah.
Shattered the Big East record. I think it was 11.
Yeah. Crazy. I mean, the Big 12, I think eventually, or the ACC, if it continues to stay at 16 or 18 teams each.
Yeah.
Eventually, one of those conferences could probably break this record. Maybe. I don't know. The ACC is pretty down bad right now. But, I was looking at it yesterday. Texas has more quad 1 wins than I think any other bubble team. And I was looking at that. And, a lot of the arguments, West Virginia had a really solid argument just in the sense that, they just had a good resume for a tournament team. They had solid wins. They didn't have that many bad losses until the Colorado game. Yeah. I think that's what did them in, was that loss to Colorado. But you even compare side by side, right? West Virginia had 6 quad 1 wins compared to 7 for Texas. But outside of that, West Virginia's resume was a good bit better. Anyway, we'll get into that here in a second with snubs and which teams maybe deserve to get in. But yeah, I think with Texas, it was more about for one, yes, getting a second win over A&M. I think that's big. And then, the wins over, a team like Mizzou, the Kentucky win is doing a lot of heavy lifting too. So it's was it San Diego State that beat Houston during the regular season?
Yes. Yep.
And that alone pretty much got them into the
tournament.
Tournament.
100%. I was having this, as a Mountain West graduate, I was having this conversation with some of my college buddies, and it's, San Diego State has been been the gold star of the Mountain West for a long, long time. But this year, the San Diego State team just isn't as good as they've been in the past. And that win, they would have been on the outside looking in 100% if it weren't for that win over Houston in December.
Was it a 2-point overtime win, something like that?
It was and I get it. They evaluate the whole, you evaluate all 3.5 months of play, the whole resume. But that the phrase you used is perfect. That win was doing a lot of heavy lifting on that resume.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I think that, for Texas, the fact that you had those 7 quad 1 wins is what. Yeah, I mean, it was the strength of it's an interesting conversation, right? I think if Texas was still in the Big 12 this year, they wouldn't have been in the tournament because I don't think honestly, I think whole resume and I think quality of team play, I don't think is as good as West Virginia. Arguably not even as good as Boise State. So I think the top 5 in the Mountain West were all pretty good teams. No great teams, but all pretty good. Colorado State solid, New Mexico solid. San Diego State can be, Utah State, I don't know. All these teams can do well. Okay, score predictions for Texas and Xavier. We'll get more into, or at least I don't know, over the next couple of days. Yeah. So what's your score prediction for the Texas Xavier game?
Oh, man, I've been doubting this team for a while now, and I think I'm going to stay on the doubter train. Unfortunately, I think just going back to Xavier, much better coached. I think it would have done Texas a solid if this game was played on Tuesday, because I think giving Sean Miller, I'm not really trying to just bury Rodney Terry, but giving Sean Miller an extra day to prepare compared to giving Rodney Terry an extra day to prepare, I don't think that really pays a lot of dividends for the Horns. But for Xavier, I think, that's going to be crucial. So give me the Musketeers 81-77, back and forth battle. But I just think in the end, Xavier ends up taking down Texas. I think the storyline coming out of this is, I mean, we've heard it over the past couple weeks. I think this was known back in the 23 cycle when Texas, hired Rodney Terry to that 5-year deal. The Sweet 16 game against Sean Miller and Xavier was almost like whoever wins this is going to get the job. So it will be interesting discourse if Xavier is able to beat Texas in this first four. And Texas does part with Rodney Terry. Is Sean Miller kind of at the top of the list for CBC?
There's one, like, I'm never one that likes to point to one key stat necessarily, unless like you have like a Zion level dominant player on your team, which like Texas has a really good player, like in the way of one of the best scorers we've ever seen in Texas and Trey Johnson, but he's still not like he's not a surefire first overall pick. But the one thing for me that keeps sticking out, because I think it's telling of the larger issue Texas has had in what their 15, I would say 12 losses that you could maybe, like, let's go 10 losses that could have been pretty preventable had you had more cohesion on the defensive end of the floor, given more secondary scoring support to Trey Johnson and maybe minimize some of the injury issues, or just had better injury luck this year. That said, are you in the boat that actually Texas was like more fortunate for injuries this year? Compared to the last few?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the Dylan DeSue story at Texas is unfortunate. I do.
Yeah,
it's tough because your point earlier about Kendall Weaver, and while Weaver, he just affects this team in so many ways that aren't seen through the box score. So
it's just an effort thing.
Exactly.
Effort and rebounding. Yeah.
And I think that's two of the main things that Texas kind of struggled with here and there throughout the regular season was effort, rebounding. Obviously, you mentioned secondary scoring. And so I think Weaver, it would have been nice to have him in SEC play. But I think for the most part, you lose one rotation guy per year. If you can avoid any more than that, you're in a decent spot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so here's it. This all kind of bakes together in with the whole like importance just of being healthy. Okay. Now, take this with a grain of salt because we have to wait and see until Xavier comes in the building. Xavier's not a very good, like you said, not a great rebounding team. They don't have a lot of like athleticism or length on the inside compared to some of the other better teams in the Big East. It's that, yeah, that's where I think Texas can have the edge here, is the fact that Texas, in games where they've had over 15 second chance points, they're 5-0. And when they've given up over 16 second chance points, they are 0-4. Xavier is averaging a little under 9 second chance points per game this season. They give up around 10, which neither one of those is like their second chance scoring is not very good. I think they're around the 18th percentile in Division I. The fact that they don't have a lot of those guys that can do a lot of damage on the interior and get back those valuable extra possessions, especially valuable in a game like this, where you're kind of clawing tooth and nail to stay alive and advance. I think that's where Texas can get the edge. Texas, they haven't, you would think with how, I mean, especially compared to usual, man, because you got to think some of those those Chris Beard teams and that Terry team that made it to the Elite Eight, like they had some really good perimeter defenders. Even going back a ways, man, Ramey, great defender. Coleman, great defender. Marcus Carr, good defender. Even Tyrese Hunter, when he was on, was very good perimeter and transition defender. Texas doesn't have a lot of those guys anymore, especially with Weaver being out so long this year. I look at, Texas, it feels like it's really hot or cold this season from the 3-point line. But I'm trying to take a look here just so I'm not like, well, okay, I might be wrong. In the 10 games that they've had their opponents shoot over 40%, they're 2-8. So That'll be a key. Keeping guys off the 3-point line. And those 2 wins, one came against A&M, was that Trevon Mark, and then apparently Delaware State shot 46% from 3 against us. I forgot about that. The Delaware State kind of hung with them for a second. Yeah. So, but I mean, a lot of these other teams, Florida, Arkansas, Tennessee, Ohio State. Florida obviously is a great team. Tennessee, very good team. But like Ohio State, Arkansas, even UConn to an extent. UConn got beat by Xavier. These are teams that are on a similar playing field, I think, to Xavier in terms of total team quality. So,
yep.
That like you said, it comes back to those 2 points of like, Texas has a couple of key advantages, and then, if they're not on point with their defense, then it could be a long day on Wednesday. Okay. Anything else you want to mention about the Xavier game? I am planning on having Tarek on so we can, talk about this game and honestly just the postseason and offseason outlook a little bit more, because who knows how long this run lasts for Texas. Hopefully, you get a week or two. Maybe even just 2 games would be nice, but
yeah. I think that my last thing would be expect Trey Johnson to play. I think he's going to play well. He's certainly going to get a lot of shots up. I mean, we saw Tennessee made a concerted effort to keep the ball out of his hands. He only attempted 8 field goals in that game, and that was his second lowest mark of the season. Over the 3 games in the SEC tournament and that Oklahoma regular season game, he was averaging 14 points a game, shooting 28% from the field. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with the 0 for 14 mark against Oklahoma, but still, not a great close to the season for Trey. So expect him to look for his shot early and often, and I would expect him to play well. Yeah,
you bring up good. Yeah. I like that you mentioned Trey's ability to score here, because it's nice that on, the national scene before the NBA draft, you're going to get to see him on national TV in the postseason, even if it is a first 4 game. It was disappointing to think that, Texas might just kind of waste his 1 season here. But, at least he's got a chance. His team's got a chance to at least make, an okay run. All right. I want to talk about biggest snubs for the NCAA tournament, because Texas got in, but there are a handful of teams that definitely had valid cases, I would say, to get in the tournament. I had an article over at Busting Brackets that talked about the 3 teams I felt like should have. Well, okay, there's 1, maybe 2 teams I felt like should have gotten in the tournament. Let me ask you this up front, though, because I think it's interesting. What 1 team got in do you felt like really shouldn't have?
I think it was North Carolina. I mean, and I've said this about the bubble. I mean, this bubble was weak. All the teams had a lot of flaws. You could manipulate the metrics and the resumes to argue whatever you want. And, while the quad system, it has a little bit of flaws with, its hard lines of delineation between quad 1, quad 2 type games. For North Carolina to go to 1-12 in quad 1 and to have 1 win against an at-large quality team, and that was UCLA. I mean, like, what are we doing here?
It was yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you can jump in.
I was just gonna say it was brand name and Ken Palm
rankings
that really carried them.
Yep, and I understand. I'm a big believer of the predictive metrics. And I think guys like Ken Palm, Bart Torvik, I think they do a great job. But it was those metrics that carried North Carolina. And I think at some point, you can say, they were better than all the rest of the bubble and all of these, metrics and grading systems. But at some point, you just got to look at the results. And, like UC Irvine, who lost a close game to UC San Diego, 2 great teams out of the Big West yesterday. Like UC Irvine would have killed someone to get 1 opportunity against a quad 1 team in the non-con. And North Carolina had all of these opportunities against quad 1 teams, and they couldn't. I mean, they beat 1 in UCLA, and like that's like a whatever win to me. So I think it's unfortunate. Certainly brand name carried them. The committee members can go on and say, Bubba Cunningham was outside the room every time we discussed North Carolina, but to not think that, in the back of, a human's mind that this guy is the director of the committee and that North Carolina somehow slides in the tournament. I don't think it was rigged or anything, but I do think, valid gripes across the board. But who was your kind of top teams that got left out that could really that should be really blowing up the Reddit threads at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, West Virginia, I think we had mentioned it earlier. West Virginia was number one for me. They were, I think they had a better case to make than Texas, Xavier, and North Carolina. Maybe Texas because they had one more quad one win, but definitely more so than Xavier and UNC. I mean, Xavier did good enough, I think, to get in. Enough quad one and quad two wins. San Diego State again with that Houston win. You take away that Houston win, San Diego State, I don't think is even in the bubble conversation. But Houston, I believe, got a 1 seed. Yeah. Midwest. Yep. So yeah, Midwest 1 seed. And so anytime you beat a 1 seed and you have a pretty quality conference resume, that's a hard team to leave out. My other two, I think Boise State had the second best case to get in. I still think that they probably should have gotten in over UNC. They had more quad one wins. And then I had Indiana just because, I know a lot of people talk about the Michigan State and the Purdue wins. Indiana had a decent resume in the Big Ten. They played well enough, I think, down the stretch to be in the conversation. I have Indiana as kind of pretty distant third. I think the Texas, San Diego State, and Xavier were all more deserving of getting in the tournament than Indiana. If not just for straight up record, I almost think you could say Ohio State was more deserving than Indiana. But Indiana, the non-con, was one of the worst strengths of schedule in the entire major conferences, 60 plus teams. And that's you're a big brand name like that. I don't think there's an excuse for having that poor of a non-con schedule, strength of schedule. So,
yep.
The Big Ten, and it just wasn't that strong this year at the top of the conference. You had some decent, you got some quality teams like Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue still are solid teams, but you don't have anyone that's elite. I think this year in the Big Ten, I don't find a tournament. I don't find a title contender out of the Big Ten this year, I guess is a good way to put it for me. Are there any snubs for you?
I think you named them all. I think West Virginia is the one where you actually do feel like last year it was Seton Hall. You actually do feel a bit bad for West Virginia, especially with the Tucker DeVries injury. Obviously, the committee factored that in, but Tucker DeVries, who probably their best player, if not their second best player, out for most of the year, and they still put up a 19-13 record. That team was just fun to watch. I think they did enough to make the tournament, and I would say I liked both Big Ten teams, Indiana and Ohio State, ahead of Boise State. I think, Boise State did have those non-con wins over Clemson and St. Mary's, which were big. But, I just like the total body of work by the other teams. I think the difference between Indiana and Ohio State is Indiana had less of those upper echelon wins. You mentioned winning in East Lansing and against Purdue. Those are huge. But they handled everyone that they were supposed to beat. Where Ohio State had more top-level wins, but they lose a neutral to Iowa, they lose at home against Northwestern, at home against Pitt. Those losses are gonna really ding you. So, but like I said, I think it's a weak bubble, so no one really gets to complain. The fact we did see North Carolina in there, I think, is a bit surprising. But to me, I think they're gonna lose to. I'm not even that impressed with San Diego State this year. I actually think we can get into the bracket as a whole. I think for UNC, it actually, there's a decent path to make the second weekend, which is hilarious to say because I don't think this team is any good, and we've seen them play 14 at-large teams, and they're 1-13. But if they get by an SDSU team that isn't as strong as they've been in years past, square off against Ole Miss, that could go either way, and then you probably get an Iowa State team without Keyshawn Gilbert. So UNC actually has a decent path to potentially make the second weekend, but I digress.
Yeah, I mean, I think even without Keyshawn Gilbert, I think Iowa State has proven that they can. I mean, they almost beat BYU without Taman Lipsey and Keyshawn Gilbert in the Big 12 tournament a few days ago. Yeah, but I mean, North Carolina, because you removed the quad one and they look really good because they have one loss outside of quad one. So yeah, I mean, San Diego State, that counts as I believe that counts as a quad two because San Diego State is, are they in the net? It's right on that borderline.
It would be a quad one. They're in the top 50. They're
I'm
at
net at 52,
Oh
so
yeah, 52. You're right.
right
So
on that cutoff. But
yeah,
so yeah, maybe. I mean, North Carolina's been money in those games, so
that's
um,
fair. That's a great point.
but either way, for the bracket, it doesn't matter much because I don't think they're going to make it to my opinion, I don't think they're going to make it out of round one um, in the postseason. So, all right, you ready to go through a preliminary bracket and
Yeah, let's do it.
we'll see what we come up with. So this doesn't mean. I think later when we talk about the Texas game and more implications there, we can give our final four picks and then everything from there. Wrong part to share. All right, there we go. All right, so sharing my screen over here. All right, so we can start with the South region. I've got Auburn winning. What is that? Alcorn State and Stephen F. Austin.
Alabama State, I think.
Alabama State. Okay.
And St. Francis.
Oh, it's St. Francis.
16 and 17. And
oh yeah, it is. Okay, man. There's so many schools. Yeah, Hornets, and I don't know what St. Francis mascot is, but all due respect to those teams, still gonna go with Auburn. So at the 8-9 game here, I actually think Louisville is a sneaky good team here. It's unfortunate that they get matched up against Auburn because I think that if they got Duke, that could be a close one. Again, they usually keep conference opponents far away from each other, but do you have Louisville over Creighton?
Yeah, I think Louisville is the most underseeded team in the dance. When I saw them as an 8, I mean they were the fourth team revealed after that first matchup. I was shocked. And when I saw them as an 8, I was like, okay, the ACC is getting no respect. North Carolina is out. And then, of course, 30 seconds later, North Carolina is in. But, yeah, I like Louisville there.
I think it was kind of a shock to me that you had Michigan as a 5 and Louisville as an 8.
Well, I think, and this is a flaw with the selection committee, games on Sunday don't matter at all. They've proven that time and time again. They don't matter literally in the slightest. The Big Ten champion has never mattered. And I get it. It's weird. The Big Ten championship always ends 15 minutes before they go live. But I think that's just a flaw in the system as a whole.
I'm going to go with UC San Diego here. I know that's going to be a popular 5-12 pick, but
yeah,
I get why. Okay, we're not doing this bracket to try to compete with anyone. This is just what we think are going to be the best picks just kind of off the top. So
I think the winner of Michigan, UC San Diego, makes the Sweet 16. I lean Michigan right now, but you
do? Okay.
Yeah, not a strong lean, and like I said, I think whoever wins that matchup will beat the A&M Yale winner.
I'm gonna go with A&M here. I
think it's fair. I mean, it's interesting because when you think of the lower seeded teams, you think A&M will be able to just out physical them, but watching some Ivy League this year, the Yale team is incredibly physical. So I think they're ready to bang with A&M, but I think Wade Taylor, Zurich Phelps, the individual efforts from those guards will probably be enough to get it done. But I hope not. But that's fair.
I mean, Yale did hold their own. I think they played Purdue out of conference, and they lost by single digits. So it could be an interesting game. But yeah, I think A&M's probably got that one. I'm gonna have Ole Miss over San Diego State or UNC. I got Iowa State over Lipscomb. Mark, man, picking in Shaka Smart to advance is always tough.
Yeah, this is a tough. Yeah, this is going to be a great game.
Do you have Mark? I'm gonna. Oh, man, I don't know. This one's almost a coin flip for me.
Yeah.
I think New Mexico's going to be motivated. They're a good team, and Marquette always disappoints it. Or like, it's not even Marquette, just like Shaka Smart, it feels like always disappoints.
Yeah, ever since that VCU run. Yeah, I like New Mexico. Last year I had New Mexico as an 11 seed making the Final Four, and of course they lost to Clemson in the first round. Donovan Dent is one of the best players in the country. So the Donovan Dent Cam Jones matchup is going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Donovan Dent was the Mountain West leading scorer, right?
Yep, player of the year, leading scorer. Yep.
Over 20 a game, right?
Yeah, he's 20 a game and over 6 assists. Like he is high usage rate, but no problems there because of how good of a player he is.
Yeah, don't mean to toot my own horn here, but I did the Mountain West tournament preview for busting brackets, and I did have Colorado State winning the Mountain West.
Hey, there you go. The Rams.
Yeah, I had them beating New Mexico in the Mountain West tournament final, but Boise State, they beat New Mexico pretty good.
Yeah.
So
that was impressive.
Okay, Michigan State over Bryant.
Yep.
All respect to the America East, but I don't think they're going to be contending much there. Shout out to a team that's not Vermont, though, getting in from the America East.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay, Duke. It looks like Cooper Flag's going to be. I think they're probably going to have him on a minute restriction, but still, I don't.
Yeah, no problems there. I like Mississippi State, though, against Baylor. And Mississippi State was a team I said at the beginning of the year that I would like their chances to make a second weekend. I think the Duke matchup will be tough. But when you have a point guard like Josh Hubbard who can score the basketball, RJ Melendez on the wing, I think they just have too much. And Baylor, I just have never really liked watching Baylor this year. Like they have a good collection of talent: Norchad Omier, Jeremy Roach, VJ Edgecombe, obviously, but I don't know. I just lean Mississippi State here.
Yeah, Baylor's result against Tennessee does make me a little hesitant because they lost against Tennessee by like 15 points at a neutral site. And Mississippi State, for any of the flaws they've had down the stretch, they are a decent defensive squad and they can play very physical. And so I think that could be a problem for Baylor. It is kind of a coin flip game for me, but yeah, I could see the edge there with Mississippi State. I got Oregon over Liberty.
Yeah, Dane Altman in the tournament.
Yeah. I got Arizona over Akron. Not much of a question for me there.
This might be an upset I look more into because I don't like Arizona. I'm the number one Caleb Love hater. So I think he could easily shoot his team out of the tournament. I think Caleb Love will shoot Arizona out of the tournament. It's just a matter of when it happens. Don't know a ton about Akron. Did watch them complete that 18-point comeback in the MAC championship, which was sweet. But I think any team that wins 28 games throughout the season is going to come into this game with confidence. So I'm fine advancing Arizona, but this is one that's going to be on my radar, and I'm definitely going to dig deeper into.
My problem with Akron is the two teams they played in the Ken Palm Top 100 are St. Mary's and Yale, and they lost by, I think it's about an average of like 18 points in those two games. So that's fair. You're right. You're right with the confidence perspective. I do like Arizona, I think, more than you. I hear what you mean because Arizona's they're a good ball club, but at the same time, Caleb Love is eventually going to be an issue for them. BYU VCU, interesting matchup.
Yeah, great game. I'm excited for this one.
I'm going to go BYU, my own opinion. Again, I do you have any?
I don't have any pushback. This is one that I'm going to take a closer look at as well. But BYU on the offensive end of the floor, I think we'll be able to propel them if they can hold on to the basketball. But I think this should be a great matchup.
It should, and man, every time I picked against VCU this season, I always come back to it. VCU could give BYU some issues, but
no doubt.
If you're looking for a good 11-6 upset here, VCU over BYU would be a good one to pick. Wisconsin, I think they're a little overrated, not very, but a little bit. I don't think there's any elite teams from the Big Ten this season. I get it. Wisconsin, Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, Maryland are decent squads. No one that sticks out to me in the top 10, though. I still have Wisconsin over Montana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no pushback there.
The thing with Wisconsin is there's a lot of decent teams around here. There's not a lot of great, I think Ole Miss could beat Wisconsin. Potentially. Maybe I'm undervaluing the Big Ten a little bit. I sound like a Big Ten hater right now.
Yeah, that's fair. Everyone's got their own perspectives.
I'm just always used to there being like an elite Purdue or Michigan State or Michigan team there somewhere, you know?
Yeah, it's more, with Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, Wisconsin, Maryland, like they got a lot of these 2 to 5 seeds, but no one that was even contending for a 1. So I hear where you're coming from.
Yeah. This might be unpopular. I think St. Mary's is one of the more underseeded teams.
I like St. Mary's. It seems like their whole roster, Marshallonis, Saxon, like all these guys have been there for years. So I like St. Mary's. Vanderbilt limped down the stretch. So
yeah. Plus, St. Mary's has easily the hardest. Like it's almost like hockey names on that team.
Yeah, they love the overseas.
Yeah.
Love the overseas players.
Yeah. Yeah, Alabama.
Take Bama. Bold.
Yeah. Over to the West region. Hey, my conference tournament picks ended up going decently well. Because I think in the video we did last week, I had Florida winning the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
SEC tournament. They did so pretty convincingly.
Yeah. Very impressive.
Yeah. None of the Florida-Tennessee games this year were close. This was the closest one today, and wasn't it still a double-digit win for Florida?
Yeah.
So, all right. I don't know for me, among these like lower-seeded SEC teams that made the tournament, I think that I guess what I'm trying to say is this is the most intriguing game to me is OU and UConn.
Yep.
I just don't want to doubt UConn in the NCAA tournament, but this is not the same UConn team they've had. Obviously, OU's been playing better though.
Yeah, UConn's bad on the defensive end of the floor. I don't really like either of these teams, if I'm being quite honest. So you can go.
I think it's just a battle to see who gets smacked in the round of 32.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Yeah, that's fair. So whatever way you're leaning, I'm in.
Just for the SEC's sake, let's go OU. But I have no idea how I'll end up thinking about that pick. Here's an interesting one for another 5-12 is Memphis and Colorado State. How high are you on Memphis? Because I've heard your opinion on them.
Not very. So I think Memphis has a terrific, out of conference resume. Wins, I think they beat Michigan State, Missouri, Clemson, Ole Miss, and UConn. And I mean, so that's nothing to scoff at. I just think when you watch them, they remind me of Texas in a sense, just isolation basketball on the offensive court.
Tyrese Hunter.
Floor. They do have Tyrese Hunter. If Tyrese Hunter's healthy, that'll be something to watch for. I think he would be a big addition back into the rotation. But I'm not a big fan of this Memphis team, for being honest. I just don't think Penny Hardaway's that great of a coach. Memphis and Colorado State are literally polar opposites. Like Memphis is full of talent. Not that well coached, a lot of isolation basketball on the offensive side of the floor. Colorado State, not a ton of talent, very well coached, very in sync, one of the best offensive teams in the country in regard to moving the ball and getting open shots. So to me, the latter lends itself to a win in the tournament. Obviously, I'm a bit biased with my allegiances on this one, but I do think this is a great 5-seed pull for Colorado State because I think they match up well with Memphis, unless Memphis just absolutely out physical and athletics them, which I don't think will happen. But I like the Rams here.
Yeah, same. I could see them. I could see Colorado State winning maybe 2 games. We'll see.
Yeah, on the table.
Maryland's a good team though. I don't think Grand Canyon's all right.
Yeah, they're fun. Foster Grant's good, but Maryland.
I think it's going to be a pretty decisive Maryland win.
Yep.
I get that these 6-11s can be pretty closely matched. I think that Mizzou can win this one pretty easily.
I agree with you. I mean, shout out to Ben McCollum though at Drake, like what he's done, coming up from the D2 ranks. But I agree that this is kind of Mizzou going away. You'll really get out and run and use their athletes against a Drake team that has a lot of D2 players that Ben McCollum brought with him. So I do think that if Drake hangs around and you look up with 10 minutes to go, it's a tight game. The Bulldogs could then become like very, very live. But I think Missouri is going to try to get out and run on them early and often.
Agreed. My dad's from Wilmington, so I got a special place in my heart for UNCW. Doesn't mean that game's going to be any closer. And I think a lot of people, UNCW is, I think, one of the lowest rated teams in terms of net ranking in the tournament. I'm going to go Tech by a pretty decisive margin. Kansas and Arkansas, again, another one of these really interesting games. Who you putting faith in? Bill Self and probably the worst team he's had in a while, or an Arkansas team missing Boogie Fland? And man, John Calipari just cannot win a game to save his life in the tournament.
Yeah, I know.
I'm probably going Kansas, my own opinion, but
yeah, I lean Kansas, but every time I thought Kansas was kind of dig themselves out of the season from hell, they would just lose again. So I don't really know what to think of the Jayhawks. I don't think the Jayhawks have a very high ceiling in regard to what they can do in this tournament. But then you look at the talent on their roster, it's hard to ignore. So that's fair.
This one is probably one of those coin flip games, though.
Definitely.
Yeah. St. John's in Omaha. Do you agree that St. John's is probably the worst 2 seed?
Worst.
Is it them or Michigan State?
I
shouldn't say worst. I should say the most overseeded.
Least deserving. No, I think them winning the Big East tournament. I think they're better than Michigan State and probably more deserving too. But the Big East being down kind of capped their resume on what it was.
Yeah. All right. St. John's. Okay, over to the Midwest. Gonzaga, Georgia. I'll probably go Gonzaga, but I could be talked out of it.
I don't love Gonzaga, but I also don't love Georgia.
Yeah,
and I just trust
that
Ryan
Florida
Nembhard.
win just always suckers me into, and the Kentucky win, those always sucker me in with Georgia. But yeah, I think Gonzaga's the better team.
Yeah, trust Ryan Nembhard in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, for what you want to say about Gonzaga without winning a title, they do usually make an okay run in the tournament.
Yeah, I think it's 8 Sweet 16s in a row or something. Yeah. Which is insane.
It's amazing that they have not won once. It's hard to believe. Okay, Clemson and McNeese.
McNeese is going to be everyone's favorite upset pick, but when everyone zigs, you got to zag.
I was going to say, like, McNeese, I actually think Colorado State is probably the best 12 seed.
They were the top. The committee ranked them as the top 12 seed.
Okay, which makes sense.
No, actually, it was UC San Diego, Colorado.
Oh, yeah, State. Never mind. Yeah, UC. I keep on thinking they're an 11 seed. I'm going to go Clemson.
Yeah, I agree. Chase Hunter is like 25. Finds a way. And I don't think Clemson's like McNeese likes to speed you up. I don't think Clemson's going to fall into their trap.
Yeah, and I think McNeese is going to have a little bit of issue with Clemson's length. Like McNeese, again, good team. They played Alabama pretty well earlier this year. I think the thing with McNeese is they haven't beaten all that many good teams. I think I have to go back to their resume. I think their best win. Yeah, here, I got it up here. Their best win is North Texas. I think on the video the other day, I was very pro North Texas, but I don't think that they're like, they're not Clemson. So anyway, Purdue High Point, unless you're expecting a Matt Painter letdown.
No, this is one that I'm going to give a little more look to, but I don't know a whole lot about High Point, so picking them would be disingenuous.
Yeah, they're good compared to past seasons, but I also, if High Point was like I don't know. Yeah, I think Purdue's probably got that. Anyway, all All right, we've gotten to the Texas, potentially where Texas could be in the round of 30 or round of 64. I think Illinois is probably going to win. I actually think Xavier would push Illinois more than Texas.
I think the only saving grace about Illinois is that their best players are freshmen, with Yakachonis, Will Riley, and Ivisic, but they're one of the best rebounding teams in the country. So if Texas beats Xavier, good luck. Good luck. They're just going to out-physical the Horns. So, or Xavier, for that matter. So
Brad Underwood also, he's a pretty good postseason coach, and he's beaten the Longhorns before. All right. Yeah, I'm going Illinois there. And I think we're in agreement. Kentucky, to me, they're one of the most overseeded SEC teams.
Definitely, but they'll be able to score enough to beat Troy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Kentucky's going to we'll get there in a second, but I think they're going to have some trouble with Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
This one's interesting. UCLA and Utah State. I'm probably going to stick with UCLA, but again, all the 7-10s in this one are, Marquette, New Mexico, and then I think the only lopsided 7-10 this year might be the St. Mary's game.
I think that's fair. I'm not big on UCLA, but Utah State struggled down the stretch after starting incredibly hot. And the Mountain West has always been poor in the tournament. We already have Colorado State and New Mexico advancing, so I think, give UCLA the nod here.
Tennessee and Wofford. I don't think Tennessee is going to have that big of a letdown.
Yeah, unless Fletcher Lawyer walks out of the Terriers tunnel.
All right. Let's go back up here to the South region. Auburn, Louisville. It could be an interesting game, but I think you said something the other day about Auburn, losing some of the games that they have recently. They've looked the worst they have this season, I think, over the past couple of weeks. And that said, their worst loss was, an 11-point loss to A&M. That one, not great. But the other two, losing to Alabama in overtime, then losing to Tennessee by a couple of possessions, those aren't really a big deal per se. Alabama and Tennessee are two of the best teams in the country. Louisville can beat Auburn. I think there's a select group of teams that can beat Auburn on any given day at a neutral site. I don't think Louisville is one of them.
Agree.
UC San Diego and A&M, man. I actually think that one could be kind of close.
I'm whoever wins Michigan, UC San Diego, I have in the Sweet 16. So that's kind of my stance on this.
I would pick A&M, but I'm not super staunch on it, so I'll give in there. I would probably favor A&M myself, but yeah, I could see that. I could see UC San Diego making a pretty good run. Ole Miss and Iowa State. Oof. If Iowa State's healthy enough, I think they win this.
Yeah, I agree. Iowa State's better team. Obviously, Gilbert being out's going to hurt, but I think Lipsy should be fully healthy. So I like Iowa State here.
New Mexico and Michigan State. Michigan State probably has that one.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Over to the East region, Duke and Mississippi State. If Cooper Flagg's still dealing with the ankle, Mississippi State could push them, but Duke's proven still that even without Flagg, they're pretty good.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm gonna go Duke there. Oregon, Arizona. I think that's where Arizona probably gets knocked out.
Yeah, an agreement there too. Well, Oregon. Both teams are well coached, but yeah. I like Oregon.
BYU, Wisconsin.
I know where you're going on this, so I'll let you have it. I'm higher on Wisconsin than you are.
So but I'm slowing down on the Big Ten hate here a little bit.
Okay.
You know what? I'll go Wisconsin. The thing that worries me about Wisconsin, man, they every once in a while they just have a stinker in a game that matters a little bit. The Penn State loss, I think, that one's low hanging fruit though. But I mean, I even go back to like the Marquette loss back in non-con that they were like pretty handily beaten. That said, Wisconsin has taken care of business even on the road against some good teams this year. So, and they are playing well recently. I'm probably going Wisconsin.
I'm in. I'm in on Wisconsin as well.
Okay. Alabama and St. Mary's. Again, St. Mary's quality team. I don't think
Tough
they're good enough to
matchup.
beat Alabama.
Tough matchup. Yep.
All right, down to the West region, Florida and OU. I think Florida will blow them out. Again, Colorado State, good team. I think Maryland probably has them there.
Yeah, I think Maryland will be able to out physical them. Derek Queen, too much to handle.
Yeah. This one could be interesting. Mizzou and Texas Tech.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Those are two really solid power conference teams.
That'll be a fun game.
Tech, they've been good. The only thing that worries me about Tech is their neutral site games. They weren't very good this year.
Yeah, they kind of rounded into form later in the season, so it's tough to say. Do we say that they're not good away from Lubbock, or do we say it just took a new team kind of time to figure it out?
I don't even know if they were really. I mean, like, it was so hard to gauge how good they were away from Lubbock because you've got they lose to TCU on the road, but also they beat Houston on the road.
Yeah, they won in Allen.
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
And just clobbered an okay Arizona State team in the regular season finale on the road. I remember watching that game. I'm probably this is the hardest one for me so far because I do think Mizzou. This is another coin flip one for me. I'm probably going Tech.
I agree. I'm with Tech on this one.
Kansas and St. John's. I'm probably giving it. Yeah. All right. Midwest. Gonzaga, good team. I don't think they're good enough to beat Houston.
Agreed.
Ooh, Clemson and Purdue.
I like the Tigers. I don't think Purdue plays enough defense.
Yeah. But, okay. Again, coin flip for me. Illinois, Kentucky. I'm actually going to give this one to Illinois.
I agree. Especially, I think Lamont Butler's health is huge. If Kentucky is able to get to the second weekend, and then you can kind of get Lamont Butler like another 4 days to get healthy, that'll be massive. But I just don't see it happening. No Lamont Butler, or a limited Lamont Butler and no Jackson Robinson. It's tough for them.
And again, you see what this team has been like the last few weeks. Like the Mizzou win was solid, but outside of that, I haven't been super impressed by them in a while.
Yeah. Agreed. The injuries, they got to hit the injury bug, and it's tough.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Tennessee over UCLA.
100%.
Okay. So we're in the Sweet 16 now. I think Auburn has a.
Yeah, that's where the Cinderella. That's where the shoe
comes to an end. I'm gonna go Iowa State over Michigan State. It's close.
I would take the Spartans, but I don't have too much pushback there.
Do you think for Michigan State it's the guard play?
I think that Keyshawn Gilbert. I think the injury is, and you made a good point that without Lipsy and Gilbert, they played BYU really tough. But I just think what Gilbert does for that team, especially when you're playing this upper echelon level of opponent, is hard to make up for. And yeah, I mean, so I think that would have been a really good matchup with Jace Richardson and Holloman versus Lipsy and Gilbert, but I just ever so slightly lean Izzo in this one, but that's ever so slightly. So I'm fine with you going Iowa State.
Yeah, that one is going to be a close one. Duke and Oregon. I think by that point, Cooper Flagg's probably going to be healthier. Yeah. I'll go Duke. Wisconsin, Alabama. Again, Alabama, I think.
That'll be an interesting game. But Alabama, fair.
Wisconsin, is an impressive rotation. I just don't think they have talent on the level that Alabama does.
Yeah, no, definitely agree on that.
All right, Florida, Maryland. Do you think Maryland will push Florida there?
I think Maryland could push Florida. But I mean, Florida's just looked so impressive lately. There's going to be one of these 1 seeds is going to fall earlier than we think. It's just finding out which one. I think it's safe to move Florida through, but I would be careful when you're building out your bracket, having 1 seeds all into the Elite Eight, because every year it seems that way. And this year we've always said that it seems like there's a clear upper echelon in college basketball. And right when you say that, that's where you have a few big upsets. But
yeah. All right. This is Tech and St. John's.
St. John's.
Be a fun matchup.
Yeah, it's a dogfight. I like the John's.
Well, you got RJ Lewis or you got JT Toppin? What are we going with here?
I like RJ Lewis, Kadari Richmond, and the Godfather.
All right.
In Providence too. Wait, that's a Sweet 16 matchup. So not in Providence. But the St. John's first 2 games will be in Providence. So I think that'll pay a lot of dividends in the second round against Kansas or Arkansas.
So you St. John's?
Yeah, give me St. John's. I think they're a better team in total. Like JT Toppin, probably the best player on the court in that game, though.
Houston, Clemson. I'm gonna go with Houston.
Yep, agreed.
Illinois, Tennessee. I always have issues with Tennessee once they get past the Sweet 16.
It's fair.
I don't know if Illinois is a good enough team to beat them.
I'd like Tennessee in this matchup because of it's upperclassmen versus underclassmen.
Yeah.
You got Chaz Lanier, Jemai Mashak, Zakai Ziegler versus Will Riley, Jakob Chonis, Ivisic. Like I favor Tennessee in that matchup.
All right.
Tennessee's always susceptible to a bad game though, where they score like 50 points.
Yeah. It's just how long does that take is always the question.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So we got Auburn, Iowa State again. Iowa State, good team, but yeah, Auburn. I could be talked into Alabama over Duke.
I won't be the one talking you into that. But,
okay.
If Alabama shoots like with just the way they play offense, all they got to do is shoot 40% from 3, and they could beat literally anyone going away. So I don't hate it if you want to go Bama here. Like I won't be the one banging.
Part of this is because I just don't want to have all 1 seeds in the Final Four.
That's fair.
I think Duke. There's enough tough games here between Mississippi State, Oregon, and Alabama. Like that's a fairly tough path.
Yeah.
Those are 3 top 25 teams you got to play to get there. Where like Auburn, yes, Louisville, good team. UC San Diego, good team, but not top 25. And then Iowa State, good team, not as good as Alabama.
Yeah, it's fair.
All right. Florida and St. John's. I could be again. This is one that I almost you saying with Florida. Yeah, with Florida, it hasn't been very hot and cold, but it's been a little hot and cold this season.
Yeah.
And they got multiple scores they rely on. I think St. John's matches up okay.
Yeah, I think St. John's could out physical Florida and push them off their spots and really make it tough for them to kind of rain down like they have been over the past couple of weeks. So I think this would be a really interesting matchup. 2 clashes of styles.
Yeah.
And it's hard to pick against Rick Pitino in these big games. I mean, just what he's done throughout his career. This is a coin flip one to me. If you don't want to stay as chalk, I would send St. John's through.
Let me see something really quickly because I've been pretty high on Florida all season. I guess my only thing is I haven't seen an instance where Todd Golden's really made like a super impressive tournament run. Like that. You always have questions with the head coach, like
definitely, it's fair.
Yeah, so I mean, by the time you reach the Elite Eight, those questions do kind of subside a little bit, but yeah. I mean, I picked Alabama. On the other side, we can go St. John's here. I'm a little reluctant toward that, but like I said, I could see Florida because you got multiple scoring threats on either team. St. John's could take that away, and Pitino's a good postseason coach. I'm going to go Houston over Tennessee.
Agreed.
Okay. I've got Auburn over St. John's.
Yep. I think that Auburn is just more talented and they can match St. John's physicality.
I'm going Auburn Houston.
Yep. I agree with that as well. Let's see. I have a team that I favor in this one. I'm curious who you favor. He's thinking long and hard.
The thing is that, like, I mean, you can't put much stock into when they played each other in November.
What was the final score in that one?
74-69.
Yeah, that's throw that in the trash.
Auburn won that game.
Yep.
You know, Houston, the SEC got the best of them, or at least the state of Alabama, I guess more accurately, got the best of them. I think that Houston, even though they don't have someone necessarily the size of Janai Broome, has the chops to handle Auburn.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think Juwan Roberts can match up with Broome.
Mm-hmm.
And I slightly like Houston's guards better than Auburn's.
I think this is the year that Houston finally gets the job done.
They were my pick at the beginning of the year, and I'm not shying away. Houston would have been my pick from the get-go as well. Got the official Hook 'em Horn Show bracket with the Houston Cougars over the Auburn Tigers.
I'll be honest, like, I think for my Final Four, that's probably what it's going to look like outside of, I'd probably move Florida in instead of St. John's, and I think you'd probably move Duke in instead of Alabama, but... Yeah,
that's fair. It's fair.
Otherwise, I think a lot of the value you get's probably just round of 64, which isn't all that unusual, but, like, the 1 seeds and half of the 2 seeds are so dominant that, like, I don't know how much value you really have beyond that. And so it's just, you got to hope that you get stuck with some casuals. And your bracket pool, someone that's going to be like, oh yeah, UNC's usually good. 11 seed, let's have them going far.
Yeah. So we said it all year. There's a clear line in the sand of kind of the top teams in the country. And so kind of played out in the way our bracket came out.
There's always uncertainty. You got teams again out there like the Iowa States, like the Dukes, like who was the other one I was thinking of earlier? It's escaping my mind, but you got a couple of injured teams out here that those injuries could play a role.
Yeah, Kentucky,
that's right. Kentucky. And so between the 1s, 2s, and the 3 seeds, that's something to watch out for. Otherwise, I think this could be a year of the 1 seed. Alabama had a valid fight to beat, like, Alabama. Once Florida won the SEC, Alabama's chance of being a 1 seed kind of flew out the window.
Yeah.
But, you had 3 teams in the SEC that are all valid. I think you probably should have, like, you could have probably had 6 1 seeds this year.
Yeah. Based on resume. I hear that.
Yeah. But, and then I'm not counting out, what do we got? Like St. John's and Michigan State, because I think Michigan State, regardless if they're a 2 or a 3 seed, is still a really good team. I still think they're on that. They are the best team in the Big Ten, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And then, the Big 12, you got 3? I'd say you got 3 teams from the Big 12 that are legitimate threats to go to the Sweet 16 or the Final Four, between Texas Tech, Iowa State, and Houston. I struggle to find much in the Big 12 beyond that because I just don't think Arizona and Kansas are all that good past maybe the round of 32 or the Sweet 16. And the ACC, you really just have Duke. It's crazy to me. I know Clemson's a 5 seed, and I do think they're a good team. I think that Duke and Louisville are the 2 best teams in the ACC. Like you said, I think Louisville's pretty underseeded. I think they really kind of got a shit end of the stick here that they might have to play Auburn. That said, I think Creighton's one of the more overseeded teams, and so I think they kind of, I think you look at some of the other 8s and 9s, and this is the last thing I had wanted to say. Maybe OU. Do you think OU, Georgia, okay, so we got OU, Georgia, Mississippi State, Baylor, UConn, Creighton, and Louisville. Is Creighton the worst nine, or just the worst of those teams?
I think Oklahoma is.
Okay.
And then Baylor. I like Creighton. I'm not a Creighton hater.
Neither am I. I just think that they were probably more appropriately as like a 10 seed.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't push back on where they're at, honestly. But I think,
Yeah, I guess 9 versus 10 isn't a huge difference.
yeah, when you look at like 7 through 10, you can kind of, it's preference at that point. Like everyone's watched a lot of basketball this year. Us, the selection committee, everyone on Twitter, though maybe not everyone on Twitter, so you take that with a grain of salt. But for the people that have watched a lot of basketball, it's almost preference at that point. Like, what games have you caught? Did you miss one where they put up a stinker or looked really good and things of that nature? So that's what makes these. I think the nines have beaten the eights like 68% of the time since 2018. I think I read.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they showed that was on ESPN or something earlier. That I think it's 30. The eights win 32% of the time, so that would mean the nines win 68% of the time. So
I guess to a certain extent that's not super surprising because like the idea with the eights and the nines is that that's kind of like that 25 to 30 range of teams, where it's like I think once you reach the top 20, that's like a separate echelon of teams usually. Yeah, like the 20, like the 12 to 20 range is usually pretty interchangeable, maybe 14 to 20. And then, obviously you got top 10 and then maybe a group of like 2 or 3. This year it's just that group of 2 or 3 is like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Teams. Yep. And then so I'd say, and then only other thing I would ask you is who do you think is the most underseeded team and who's the most overseeded?
Underseeded, I think Louisville. I think we touched on that. Overseeded, we touched on this earlier, and I kind of agree with where you're coming from. I think it's probably Kentucky. They kind of limped down the stretch, and just the style of how they play with, really struggle on the defensive end of the floor, a lot of points, super volatile style of basketball. And I think overall, some of their losses are not inexcusable, but, tough to overlook. And having them as a 3 seed seems a little high. They're more of a 4, potentially even a 5 to me.
All right. Most overseeded to me, I'm gonna go Utah State. No, sorry, Memphis. I think Memphis is the most overseeded.
I like that.
I think Memphis is the most overseeded. Underseeded. I'm going to give you an interesting answer here because it kind of goes against the logic of our first round picks. Like UC San Diego would be an easy one. I'll go VCU.
Ooh.
I think VCU and BYU could be like a 7-10 and that even an 8-9, and you're not getting any arguments out of me. BYU going as far as they did in the Big 12 tournament pretty much solidified them as a top 7 seed at least. But had they not played, here's the thing: had they not played an injured Iowa State team, you probably have a 7 or 8 seed BYU. So they're just kind of the benefactors of that. Richie Saunders is a very good player. Don't get me wrong, but
Denham's good too. Good team, but I like that call on VCU. I think they'll be live, definitely. And if they end up playing Wisconsin in the second round, I know who you'd like to reach. Nah, I like painting you as an anti-Big Ten guy, even though it's not true.
No, I
got to create narratives this time of year.
Yeah, exactly. I think the Big Ten's probably the 3rd best conference this year because there's this just great big void, honestly, after the SEC. Like the Big 12's got, again, some solid teams. The fact that you have Houston being as good, I just think that we thought that the Big 12 was probably going to be better. Yeah. Like Kansas, super disappointing this year. I was expecting, Baylor, pretty disappointing this year, honestly.
Yeah.
I was expecting more kind of out of that tier of teams that's like the Cincinnatis, the Kansas States. Yeah. Tech surprised me a little bit, and I was expecting Arizona to be better than they were. Yeah. They were still good, but they did a lot of heavy lifting in Big 12 play. So, easily the most disappointing conference being the ACC. Hands
Oh, yeah.
down.
Yep.
You just never expect I mean, and it's just I think you could chalk that all up to head coach resignations almost.
Yeah. Tony Bennett and Larinaga left them high and dry.
And Florida State.
Yeah, Leonard
Coach
Hamilton
coming to the end. Yeah, Notre Dame. I mean, Roy Williams from a couple of years ago.
Oh, you're talking more than just this year. Yeah.
I'd almost just say the past 3 years.
Yeah, definitely. That's fair.
And then they just didn't get any value.
Boeheim.
Yeah. They didn't get any value, though, out of the 3 teams that have joined. Stanford, Cal, and SMU. I mean, SMU wasn't a bad team because they were, I think, a lot of lists had them as the next 4 out.
Yeah, they weren't seriously a bubble team when the bracket was being decided, but they certainly were the past, down the stretch, and they would beat any team they were favored against, and they would lose to any team they're underdogs against. And so they were just exactly average.
SMU has enough money to be a competitive basketball team in the future, and there's plenty of recruiting to do out of DFW. Yeah,
we've seen them in the AAC. They've had a couple teams with high seeds.
When you see the rise for the football program and how much money they invest there, and maybe they do invest that in basketball. They have the money for it for sure. But all right, you got anything else you want to say before we get going? There's one more thing I'm looking up to see if the women's bracket's been mostly announced yet. I'm assuming so.
I think just good time of the year. Good time. Shout out Texas baseball too. If you're watching this far, you're a Texas fan. Sweep over the Mississippi State Bulldogs in your first SEC series of the year. So the athletic department's churning. Definitely stay tuned though, because regardless of what happens, either Texas is going to go on a little bit of a run here, or Rodney Terry is going to get fired. And so we'll be back.
We'll be digging into that storyline though here later this week with Tarek.
Exactly.
Yeah, that one's an interesting one. So
definitely keep locked in.
Yep. Texas women's 1 seed in Regional 3. Interestingly enough, in their side I think their side of the bracket's fairly manageable, but 2 seed TCU, 5 seed Tennessee. So
that'd be a tough Sweet 16 matchup.
Potentially. TCU and 3 seed Notre Dame.
Ooh.
So yeah. Yeah, the way they seeded the women's bracket this year is more interesting, I think, in terms of the matchups than the men. Because in Regional 2, right, you got 1 seed South Carolina, 5 seed Alabama. And you got 2 seed Duke, 3 seed North Carolina. You got 3 seed OU, 7 seed Oklahoma State. You have a lot more rivalry matchups there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Anyway. All right. Well, as soon as Tuesday, we're going to, Tuesday night, I think big game, UNC San Diego State. So have a little bit more coverage for you there. And obviously we'll be coming back to discuss Texas. I don't know if that'll be tomorrow or Tuesday. We'll figure that out. But all right. Exciting time of year. Anything else you got?
No doubt. Excited.
All right.
Very excited.
All right. For Andrew Miller, Shane Black, Hogan Horn Show, that's pretty much it. Hogan.